Welcome back to Extra Literary Affairs, a podcast for the lit curious reader, because why not read a little bit of everything? I'm Jennifer Smith.
And I'm Joey Kelly.
And today we are having an affair with Louise Erdrich and her short story, Domain. This story was first published in Granada Magazine, which is one of our favorite literary magazines, and is included in her very recently published short story collection, Python's Kiss, which just came out in March of 2026. In keeping with our months-long examination of the United States at 250 years old, I'd like to read yet another sentence from the Declaration of Independence. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Back on the theme of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but this one is a bit more wordy. 250 years in, we are still working out who gets to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, and in what form and at what price. This week's story asks these questions in the most unexpected way. We follow a woman into the afterlife, or her version of it, only to find that happiness is sold by subscription. And for one woman, the woman who's narrating the story, vengeance is the only plan that makes sense to her. Joey, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Louise Erdrich and her history?
Sure. Since we have never read from this author before, we have to learn a little bit about her. So here's some fun facts. Her father paid her a nickel for every story she wrote as a child. So growing up in North Dakota, Erdrich was encouraged to write by her German-American father, Ralph, whom she calls her biggest literary influence. Because he gave her this money for every story that she ended up producing, it fostered a love for storytelling very early on. She was also part of the first class of women to attend Dartmouth College. She was born in 1954 and graduated from Dartmouth in 1976, and that year marked the first time the Ivy League school admitted women. While there, she met her future husband, writer and anthropologist Michael Doris, who was directing the college's new Native American Studies program. She owns a bookstore in Minneapolis, Birch Bark Books, that's a tongue twister, that became the setting for one of her novels. So her bookstore specializes in books, art, and crafts by Native artists, and was used as the haunted bookstore setting for her 2021 novel, The Sentence, in which she even made a cameo appearance. Clearly, Erdrich is a woman who believes in physical books in a physical world, which, as we will see, is not a neutral detail when it comes to Domain.
Domain is a speculative fiction short story set in the near future, or if you're feeling a little cynical and pessimistic, it might be set a little bit closer to our current time frame. In Erdrich's short story, a handful of corporations control the afterlife, and many people spend their entire lives amassing the money to upload their essence into this online cloud service. You can upload your consciousness when you die, or before you die if you choose to do so. Or you could also choose to upload your consciousness if your body is about to give out. You make that choice, but only if you have the money to pay for the privilege. Your mind becomes what she terms a super file, and through this new technology, you're transferred into a digital world that replaces the original one. Our narrator, Bernadette, arrives here not with a plan for a peaceful existence, but with a plan for vengeance.
I really like how Granada Magazine teased it at the very top. It was just the opening line of the story, a little bit of a teaser, and I'm actually going to end up reading that anyway, so you're to find out. I loved this story. I thought it was extremely well written. I've never actually read from this author before. Of course, I have heard of her, but I've never actually read anything by her. So I was excited to explore some of her writing. And something that really struck me, as it does in so many stories, is religion. In this world, there doesn't seem to really be a need for organized religion as we know it today. Of course, this is supposed to be a futuristic story. If we think that a major part of the need for religion is to help us contextualize what happens to us after we die, then I don't really see the need for it in this universe that Erdrich creates. So I just want to read the opening because I think it's a good place to start, as it is with every story. Erdrich writes, 7 corporations control the afterlife, and many people spend their lives amassing the money to upload into the best. Others, like me, assume they will need a scholarship and pile up experience. I piled up one too many. Shortly after my fall, I applied to Asphodel. I knew, of course, this particular domain, or afterlife provider, was run by the oldest entity in the business. Asphodel was known to have one of the most secure and complete visual terrains. Artists chose Asphodel if they could afford it, and I was an artist before my accident. And of course, we have a tie-in to Greek myth. It's a flower in Hades.
Joey, I love that you left us there because it just shows the strength of her beautiful storytelling. She packed a lot in those first couple of sentences. And yes, it always comes back, as you always remind us, just go back to the Greeks. You want an inspiration for a story, knock on the door, pull out a myth, drop it into your story, and it's probably going to work.
Yeah, there's always something tied to Greek myth. It's impossible to escape that. But what was really interesting to me is how money is now the only ingredient necessary to secure a place in heaven. When I was first analyzing this, I made a mistake in my analysis where I got a detail wrong. I thought there was no mention of religion outside of Asphodel, but there is, in fact, still religion that exists in this world. But we don't know what it looks like. We can guess that it's probably pretty close to what we have now because some people choose to not engage with this afterlife service. It sounds ridiculous and dystopian because it is. But we know that several people in this story that are mentioned choose to die and just risk it for the biscuit. They don't know what's going to happen after us. We still obviously do not after death. And so it's interesting that we have this sort of guaranteed afterlife. You know that you're going to live on in whatever capacity and that it is a paradise. It is what heaven is explained to be in all myth and in all religions, even today. So it's just interesting to me that this still exists. You would think it wouldn't be necessary.
And there's no moral requirement. Just a cash down payment. Any type of behavior will still secure your place in immortality. And I thought that was a very interesting differentiation there, Joey. And just two quick points before you continue. Her father did have very strong religious beliefs, which then play a pivotal role in the story later. And when she's going through her interview, because you have to be interviewed and accepted by these corporations, not only do you need the money, but you also have to have some cachet, some credentials. They ask, were you named after Saint Bernadette? And she's like, yes. What was your mom? And she's like, my mother was a Catholic theologian, but I didn't really follow her religious doctorate. So it was very interesting that on the edges, there is this religious overshadowing, but we don't know exactly how that works out. But Bernadette's like, yeah, that's them. I'm not associated with any of that.
Yeah. But we do understand that this is a very elitist program because you need the funds. And in the beginning, as I read, people have to get scholarships like you would for a college or something. We're made to believe that it is a very expensive, very select people are able to afford to buy their way into heaven. I think it's a commentary on capitalism as well. Only the most wealthy of us can afford the best and the guarantee of happiness.
And Joey, to follow up on that, they elucidated a different company. There is the company she went through, which was Asphodel, the premium and the most established company. But they said there was a next tier down, like a knockoff company. And that company was reminiscent of somebody once said to me, if you get services for free, you yourself are the product. In this exclusive community that she goes to, Asphodel, she is guaranteed some private time where her internal unconscious dreams are not recorded and are not fed up to the centralized system. But if you go to the Meadows, the cheaper version, the less secure version, they have access to your internal imaginings and your unconscious dreams 24/7. So you're also, even in your death, are being forced labor. It's like AI. They're reading your thoughts. They're stealing your dreams. They're creating a universe without your explicit consent, other than saying, I didn't have the money to protect my privacy and go to the good afterlife.
Yeah, I think this story raises a lot of questions. If we understand and we know for a fact what is going to happen after we die, does that cheapen life? Because if you're just like, well, it doesn't really matter, morality now no longer plays a factor in your access to heaven, as you said. How does that affect your everyday life while you're still living? One of the things that religions like to boast of falsely, in my opinion, is that they are the harbingers of morality. They are the ones that give people ethics and morals. So if religion is no longer a factor, or if it still is, but we do understand that there is a guaranteed way, all you need is the money, how does that change religious doctrine in this universe? It doesn't really work out in my head because there would be no point. That is the whole point of religion, at least to me, a non-religious person, that you live a pious life to get into heaven. You're trying to get something. It's a quid pro quo. I will act correctly according to this doctrine, but in return, I want everlasting paradise. So just very interesting. I really enjoyed contemplating all of these ideas.
And Joey, I loved it because when she's going through her interview, she asks the woman, does anyone get kicked out? Once you're in this afterlife, is there anything you can do to get kicked out? Because she knew when she went there, this is where my father is. I'm going to track him down and I am going to murder him. I have a very justified reason that my father needs to be obliterated. He doesn't get the right to have immortality. He needs to be erased. He needs to get deleted. What I thought was interesting about that passage, Joey, as they were describing this robot avatar that was doing the interview, it all felt very clinical, and the false closeness that you have from a talking chat GPT adjacent robot asking you questions, she said that it would change colors, and her face changed colors when she was asking the question, is there any way to get kicked out of here? Because we know in the story that she is plotting to murder her father as retribution for something that he was a part of in her past that was very hurtful. This was just such a rich and beautiful story. I did read it twice, and I'm going to read it again because there's just so many other things that keep popping up.
Yeah, I haven't read the rest of the collection yet, but I definitely want to read more of her work because it was beautifully written and extremely fascinating to think about.
Bernadette is not jumping into this afterlife assuming she's going to have a life of pleasure. That was not her intent. Her intent was to go and murder her father. That just gives a whole different cast to the story. And the way that she decides to perpetrate this revenge killing against her father, she's like, what does my father love more than anything? He loves books and he loves his mother. So she assumes, because in a digital world, you can, by thinking it, you can transform your appearance. You can become anything you want in this dreamscape. She appears to him, and this again feels a lot like Greek myth with Hermes changing his appearance, and Athena can just pop in any disguise she needs to get her way. So I'm like, looking at you, Greeks, we get it. That she appears to her father in the guise of his mother, and he's like, oh, Mom, like, it's so great to see you. And he comes forward and she bludgeons him with a brick. There's more that we'll talk about, Joey, but this idea of why would someone seek immortality? First of all, what is that about? Is that what writers do? Is that what titans of industry are trying to do with their monuments? Is that what the pyramids were built for? I don't know. It's an age-old question. I'm not going to be the person who answers it today. But it was just a very rich conversation because she already knew that what she was doing was outside social norms. She wouldn't have asked the caretakers of, hey, does anybody get thrown out of here? What's the end game? If you mess up here, what happens? And they're like, yeah, that doesn't really happen. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. And I just thought that was really interesting. Back to your original question, if immortality is guaranteed, what inspires people to live a meaningful and honest and helpful life to others if you're going to get in anyway because you've risen to the top of the capitalistic system? If you've got the cash, you're going to get in.
Yeah, which is just like life. So that's really fun.
I've never heard of that before, Joey. What a system.
Certainly, it's dystopian 100% because who wants to live in this inequity for literally eternity? No, thank you. But I think it goes back to religion again. This lack of religion, which I'm sort of contradicting myself because normally I would say religion is not necessary for morals or ethics. I have morals and ethics, and I've never been a religious person. I don't murder people. I never have and I never will. I try to be kind to people, blah, blah, blah. Okay, without religion. But I think the absence of it here is interesting because we have this alternative heaven. And so Bernadette is going to heaven to murder. Now that seems messed up to me because your intent doesn't matter. There's no judgment here. Well, there is a judgment, but it's for a different reason. Whereas if you talk about Greek myth or Egyptian mythology or Christianity, it doesn't really matter. Literally an Egyptian, they would weigh your heart with a feather, whatever. but there would be the three judges in Greek myth or something like that. Saint Peter at the pearly gates, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a question or two from him. So the intent of why she wants to go there is for revenge. But if this is something that truly makes her happy, and this is a fulfilling thing to get revenge on her father, who, for real, this was a good revenge story because he did something extremely messed up. He was with her son, his grandson, and religion plays another part in this because they were sitting outside of a church and a brick fell and hit the kid and killed him. His grandfather knew that he could call a service like Asphodel and upload his consciousness into this heaven-like place, but he decides to take the traditional route and say, whatever happens after this, it will just be this. It's interesting because he also gets into heaven and he commits suicide, basically. He decides to go upload himself earlier without any seemingly real reason, no health concern or anything. So it's interesting that you have a lot of more individualistic choice in how you get into heaven. And so this could be a good or a bad thing, just depends.
Yeah, and Joey, I appreciate that you bring in the setting of the child coming to his death. The grandfather, they were at a churchyard. The brick falls down and hits him. Now, a very deeply religious person may say that was God's will. You are all under God's care. And if God chose to strike you down while sitting in his front yard, there had to be a reason. So I can understand that the grandfather thought this was God's will. I am a devout person. I need to follow the will of God. What's this new technology? I'm going to go against what my God told me was the correct thing to do. It's just an interesting premise. Thinking back to what I know of scripture, which is not a lot, but an eye for an eye. You killed my son, I'm killing you. That sounds like a pretty fair deal, that I'm going to go here without any guilt or remorse. The Bible teaching that an eye for an eye is justified in certain circumstances. I thought that was very interesting. The author takes us to this idea that the son died 10 years ago, so a decade has passed. He died when he was 6 years old. Her father decides, as you said, to end his own life. He's like, I'm in good health. I am mentally in a great place. I've written all of these great plays. I'm a scholar. The world would be a less wonderful place if I was not in it. So we can't risk it. I better get uploaded. And he does that. And so for me, that's also an interesting question of what would cause that father's change over that 10-year time? Is that something to do with the death of his grandchild? Is it an evolution of his thought process? All of these open questions that are just fun to play around with in your own mind. Well, if I could extend my life indefinitely and borrow all the memories of all the people that have ever lived, little details are coming up that she didn't invent, but are now a part of her consciousness because it's all this one unifying mass consciousness, would you do it? And I thought was so interesting about that is that the reason our Bernadette is in this circumstance, she fell off of a building. She was free climbing on the side of a building, and the robot caretaker, whatever we want to call that, the essence cube, said, well, that's not technically illegal. And she's like, yeah, it's not technically smart either, but I did it and I fell and now my body is broken and I'm in immense pain. But silver lining, I now get entrance. There's a legit reason for me to say it's time to go. And I'm going to go kill my dad. So win-win, everyone's happy. I escape my pain and I get to seek my ultimate and true final happiness, which is to murder her father. That was her highest and best use. And Joey, what I love about playing with that idea is that she gets a chance to do it. It happens. And I don't want to say there's a glitch in the matrix, but there is a moment where she thinks she is having an experience with her father. And then she looks over and then she sees her son, who was also hit in the head and killed with a brick, not through a human hand, but just through gravity in this churchyard. That I think Erdrich is telling us we are all connected. You cannot take an action without some other reciprocal action. She loved her father before her son was killed. And then her son sort of came back in this flash of, Mom, is this really what you want?
Father-daughter.
Father-daughter and mother-to-son relationship, because it was complicated. And I just loved all of that. This is very interesting to explore parental responsibility, the bond between a mother and her child, a child to its mother. And the father, obviously, I'm sure felt great remorse over the accidental death of his grandchild and how he had to live with the knowledge that he caused his daughter so much pain because she lost her son. And I just have really been sitting with that. We are on the heels of Father's Day, so there's just been a lot of thinking for me about what responsibilities we have with our family.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting that this idea of her father and getting vengeance is what gets her through her death, literally. It's not just physically painful, it's the ultimate pain of her entire life because it's ending. It's interesting that this is the thing that she's focusing on in order to make her transition a little bit more bearable, is this idea of her father. We don't know their relationship prior to the incident with her son. I wish this was a full novel because I really want to find out what happened in that decade between the death of his grandson and the complete change. He does a complete 180 of his views on religion and death. What would cause that change? Because it wasn't instant. It wasn't like, my grandson's dead, I let him go into the ether of the unknown, and now I'm going to take my own life and guarantee that I go to heaven because now I think it's scary or something, that I just left that up to an unknown entity, if such exists. I don't know, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Joey, what I appreciate about the question you asked, what happened in that intervening 10 years between the accident and his decision to end his own life? The text states he was in perfect health. He had simply changed his mind. He considered his talents, his genius, his knowledge too valuable to risk the loss. It was a considerable leap, which for years he had persuaded many to resist. So he couldn't even buy his own party line about, no, this is bad, don't do it, it's not necessary. It's like, wait a minute, I've changed my mind. And so in some ways it's interesting to say we all have the right to change our mind. One of the things that we have talked about over the course of this month is your own bodily autonomy, your ability to change your mind, your ability to control what makes you happy, how your essence is being used. So for that to come up in very different ways in this story, I also thought was quite interesting.
It's interesting too because this is pride. That is one of the sins, okay? He is so prideful that he's like, literally, it would be too great of a loss to humankind if I just risk it and see what happens after I die. There needs to be a guarantee that I can pass on my knowledge to other people, which is good because if he's really smart and he has a huge contribution to offer people, then okay, sure, I can get down with that. But I also would like to know what happens if this company goes bankrupt. This afterlife is fueled by a living corporation. There's no guarantee that it will last for eternity. At least I don't think so from the story. It seems dependent upon if this company still exists.
That is a great point because years ago, a friend had mentioned to me, there is a very stark difference between what a corporation is and what a person is. We all know as humans, we will end. There will be an expiration date of our lives. Corporations legally live forever. Coca-Cola can be in business 500 years from now. If no one merges it or something else happens, it just continues to propagate itself into the future. So that is an interesting question, Joy, that she does not bring up. What happens if the company is sold? What happens if the natural resources of the earth can no longer provide electricity that keeps this grid going? There are a lot of things that are left unsaid. I really like that ambiguous nature of those questions.
There is too many variables as to what could happen. Even if the company continues on for as long as humans are alive, which if you're in an eternity, in a heaven state somewhere, it seems like it would probably go by pretty fast. Sometimes not going to go in the same way.
The fact that her father decided to inhabit his version of reality into an infinite library, going back to your friend, the Library of Babel, and if you live a life that is in the mind, you can explore 1,000 lifetimes. You're never going to run out of new things because you're borrowing the ideas and memories of other people.
I immediately did think of the Library of Babel because it's made to seem like it's an infinite amount of information that can now be in this library because it's based on people's memory, which are imperfect. So I'm not really sure how accurate that information is. We don't know because she's obviously not going in and reading anything, so we can't compare it and be like, oh, is this actually what this says? But I think there are some interesting aspects to this process in religious terms. What is actually being transferred? Your consciousness? Is that your soul? Because there are some things Bernadette says that I think border on, like, is this a religious experience? So one thing she says is, I have a new body and now it's made of thought. That's her consciousness, I'm assuming. But does that mean this is her soul? Is this another type of religion now that has been created? Like the religion of technology? She says, in this heaven, asphodel, she doesn't have to sleep. There's no reason you would have to do that. You're not a physical body anymore. But she says, I love sleep because now that I am immortal, it is my only way to experience relief from consciousness. We have a differentiation here that it's not just her consciousness. And it's really interesting. This is definitely sci-fi, I would say. And I wish there was a few more details. I think that the ambiguity of this story is great. And I love an ambiguous story. But I think there's some details that I wish I knew. Do they think this is their soul? Do they think it's physically a part of their brain? I mean, there is some information as to the process of this happening and how the corporation actually physically does it for them. I just want more information.
Joey, a key detail why she likes sleeping is that she can dream of her son. And because her father robbed her of the opportunity for him to be in this afterlife with her, that's the only way she has access in real time to that memory and that essence of the child. She did go through this very elaborate and graphic detail of saying goodbye to all the parts of her physicality. And I just loved it. It was very lush. It was very sexy. A reminder of you don't always appreciate what you're having when you're having it, but when you face the moment of your death or the inability to use your body in the way that you once did, it all comes rushing back. I want to just tie this back to one of the themes that we've talked about in the last couple of episodes about invisibility. Who gets to exist? We've explored in the previous episodes the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but who is that for? And we realize that's not for everyone. The Declaration of Independence was not written as a universal for everyone who existed at that time. And just to summarize that, the idea of being invisible was Susan Farr's character. The mother was excluded from the right to have her child in the United States because they didn't have the right paperwork. Ralph Ellison's narrator, unnamed, disappears into society who literally refuses to see him, hence the name Invisible Man. And here in the afterlife, she is being erased because her physical body is gone. She says it gets recycled. They literally recycle these body parts. And well, that's very environmentally conscious. Thank you for doing that. But ew, kind of gross. Because they are able to access her conscious memories, a piece of her is being erased because she's being sucked into this grid, and her memories of a tulip in her mom's front yard blooming in spring, that now belongs to anybody. You can walk by and you'll be like, hey, I smell a tulip. What's going on here? You just stole my thing. I voluntarily gave it to you, but yeah, technically that's still mine. The class divide, as we had talked about in these previous two stories, it doesn't change in the afterworld. If you don't have the cash, you don't get in. If you don't have good stories to upload into the cloud, if you don't have the right kind of thoughts, you're also not getting into this community of consciousness. I just think that was really interesting. Joy, you read that beautiful sentence from the beginning. People spend their lives amassing the money to upload into the best. Others, like me, assume they will need a scholarship and pile up experiences. So she's like, I'm probably never going to make $1 million bazillion to be able to be uploaded, but man, I am going to have some killer memories that you guys are really going to enjoy once you have a chance to have me in your community.
Yeah, I think what is also sort of strange is that memories of people also show up and they're sort of on a loop. Their consciousness is not there, but somebody remembered them enough to place them here. So it reminded me of NPC in video games where they just have a certain amount of lines that they will say in any scenario, and that's it. They're not a playable character. So if you like video games, people, you'll know what I'm talking about, okay? It felt kind of disturbing, like they were here against their will, and even though it was not physically them, their representation was still there, and they didn't have a choice in that matter, and that felt a little odd.
Exactly, Joey. Everything you see in Asphodel was remembered and deposited by somebody who paid to be there. And there's that beautiful scene of the rose seller who's in Barcelona, who knows he's never going to make it past the threshold of being able to afford this. He's selling roses on the street. He's probably not rolling in the dough. He is remembered so vividly by someone that he will be immortal, but not himself. He planted the idea of someone by literally saying, remember me, remember me. And somebody's like, well, that was really weird. I'm definitely going to remember this guy. And I had the resources to go to Barcelona and live my big life jet setting from wherever I was. It's just interesting who gets in, what's the inequity, what is the privilege to have these vivid memories. It just was really beautiful. Erdrich calls him one of the billions of other humans who existed on the planet, who made an imprint on people who don't get to experience this afterlife because there's a limited resource. Why there's a limited resource? I don't know. That sounds like some bullshit to me, but that's the system that they are in. Joey, one of the things that we were talking about were these parental relationships and how powerful that bond is. One of the things that she had to do to withstand this physical process of having the holes drilled in her brain so her essence can escape, whatever we're going to call that, is that they told them, you have to focus on something. You have to have a very vivid picture and you need to focus on something. And her mother taught her how to do this when the time came. She said, okay, this is what you're going to need to do. And she's like, okay, I am focusing on my father and I'm focusing on how much I hate him. So even when it was painful, she was like, nope, I'm good because I'm just going to think about how great it's going to feel when I kill this man who has hurt my child. He is the reason I am in so much pain. And it said, from the first instant, I know that I cannot endure it for another instant, even to gain eternal life. And then I do endure it. I go on. I have his face in focus for a moment, here and there, but then he changes and I just hold on to the hate. So the idea that even through immense, insufferable human pain, she's like, my hate is supreme and I will ride it out. And she does. That was really powerful. But then that hate that she feels for her dad flickers back to love. And she's overcome with the love of her child. And so to me, it was just this very bittersweet moment of this kaleidoscope kind of clicking through. It's like, wait, do I hate you? Do I love you? I can only hate you because there was some love that got misplaced. I just thought that was really interesting, Joey.
Yeah, that's why I wish we could see what the relationship was like prior to her son's death. Obviously, she trusted her dad to be like, yeah, you can watch my son and like go off and without me. So there was obviously love and trust there before. I get why she doesn't feel that way anymore when we meet her, but at least in the beginning there was.
And it felt like a fluke accident. The grandfather / her father, I don't think he was being wildly negligent. They weren't bungee jumping into the Amazon River. They were sitting on a park bench in a churchyard, quietly contemplating life. Joey, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for bringing this amazing new author into my world. I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of her stories. She wrote 13 stories in Python's Kiss, her new short story collection. So I look forward to reading the rest of those. And to wrap up our series of celebrating or commemorating, you choose the word you'd like to use there, America at 250. Next week, we will read Walter Isaacson's nonfiction book titled The Greatest Sentence Ever Written, which is about 80 pages of close reading about the Declaration of Independence, second sentence, word by word. So we will do a very deep dive into the concepts of what do we mean by we? What do we mean by all men? What do we mean by created equal? And also what was meant by the pursuit of happiness. Everything in our fiction so far this month has built on those concepts. It'll be really great to do a deep dive into the Declaration of Independence and really look at the theories behind the words that ended up in the final document.
Yeah, we'll see. What's going on, America? I'm not commemorating this birthday, I'm just acknowledging it. And it's like, yeah, you turned 250. All right. Okay. Let's not make a big deal of it, though, America.
The jury is still out. There is still time to turn this ship around.
We'll see. We'll see how positive we can stay. You never know. Thank you so much for watching or listening to today's episode. And if you enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much. And follow us on TikTok at Extra Literary Affairs.
Great. Thanks, Joey. See you later. Bye.